Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress with number 14 in the series We're Standing on the Shoulders of Giants, from Ruy Lopez to Magnus Carlsen, which is a series on the strongest players of their era, not necessarily the 16 official world champions, but also the strongest players of the era before the official world championship was introduced in 1886. Let's look at the list. It started in 1560 when Ruy Lopez de Segura was the strongest player of his era. He was followed up by Leonardo da Cutri, then Paulo Boy, Alessandro Salvio and Gioacchino Greco. It was clear that the power of chess in those years was in Spain and Italy. Then it went to France when Légal de Cameur was the strongest player of his era between 1730 and 1755. François-André Danican Philidor was the next strongest player of his era, followed up by Alexandre Deschapelles. Louis-Charles Maillet de la Bourdonnais is a beautiful name, and then the power of chess moved to England with Howard Staunton. Then Germany, Adolf Anderssen was the strongest player of his era in two separate time periods. Paul Morphy ruled the chess world between 1858 and 1862, the pride and sorrow of chess. And then we got the official world champions. Willem Steinitz was the first official and undisputed world champion. Then we had Lasker, Capablanca, Aljechin and the Dutchman Max Euwe. That one is in red because this video is about Max Euwe. He was followed up by Botvinnik, then Smyslov, Tal, Petrosyan, Spassky, the great Bobby Fischer, Karpov Kasparov, Kramnik, Anand, and since 2013 Magnus Carlsen is the official world champion. You can find the link to the playlist of the 13 earlier installments of this series up here. But as said, this video is about Max Euwe. We have arrived at the 5th official world champion. Magilis Max Euwe was born on May 20, 1901 in Amsterdam and died 80 years later on November 26, 1981 in Amsterdam as well. He was the 5th official world champion from 1935 to 1937. He was a Dutch mathematician and author, not a full-time professional. He got his PhD in pure mathematics in 1926. He worked as a school and college teacher and was made professor of mathematics in 1964. Against all expectations, Euwe won the World Chess Championship in a match with Aljechin in 1935. Aljechin won the title back in a rematch 2 years later. Both matches were held in the Netherlands. On October 3, 1935, the World Championship match between Aljechin and Euwe began. Prize money was $10,000 for the winner, and on December 15th, 2.5 months later, Euwe had won with 9 wins, 13 draws and 8 losses. This was the first World Championship match to officially have seconds helping the players. Euwe played in a World Championship match tournament in 1948, which decided the successor to Aljechin, who had died 2 years earlier. Euwe finished last, below Botvinnik, who was the new world champion, Smyslov, Keres and Reshevsky. Euwe played also in the Candidates Tournament in 1953, the famous one held in Zurich in Switzerland. He finished in second to last place with 11.5 points out of 28 games. But in the second round against Geller, Euwe played one of the most famous rook moves in history, 22 rook f8 to h8. And you can see the game and that amazing move in a video that I made about that game up here. Euwe wrote 20 chess books, mostly aimed at helping club players to improve. He served as the president of FIDE, the World Chess Organization, from 1970 to 1978. So the match of the century between Bobby Fischer and Boris Spassky was held under his supervision. Euwe has been honored with the Max Euwe Center, which is located on the Max Euwe Plein, the Max Euwe Square in Amsterdam. And very recently I visited that square in the center of Amsterdam, and there is a statue of the great man. And I was proud to take a selfie. It says there, Max Euwe, World Champion of Chess 1935 to 1937. And of course we'll have to look at a game from Max Euwe to see how he played. As said, I've covered Euwe's most famous game in another video already, so I have picked another one for this video. A battle between a past and future world champion. In 1957, Max Euwe played a 2-game match against 14-year-old Bobby Fischer. In fact, the first game of this mini-match was played on Bobby's 14th birthday, March 9th, 1957. It was also the year after Bobby played the game of the century against Donald Byrne, and later that year, in 1957, Bobby would become US champion for the first time, so he was already frighteningly strong. Let's have a look at the first game of the match, as said, played on the 9th of March 1957. White is Max Euwe, former world champion. Black is Bobby Fischer, future world champion. And Euwe opened with the d-pawn. Knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, and Fischer decides to play the Queen's Gambit declined. Euwe took on d5, he's playing the exchange variation of the Queen's Gambit, and you can take back with the knight, that is playable, but more common is to take with the pawn. Bishop g5 and bishop b4, and don't think you can win a piece. With queen a4 check, check, and the bishop is attacked because you can play knight c6, shielding the check and protecting the bishop. Queen a4 check is not a bad move, but it does not win a piece. Euwe played e3 instead. h6, kicking the bishop, bishop went back to h4, and now c5. Euwe played bishop d3, knight c6, and knight g to e2. This is the right square for the knight. Black sometimes want to play bishop g4, and with the knight on f3, that is an unpleasant pin. With the knight on e2, you can just, after bishop g4, play f3, kicking that bishop away, and there is no pin anymore. The knight on e2 is also protecting the knight on c3, which can get under heavy attack. If black plays the queen to a5, the knight on c3 is pinned. And also the knight on e2 may in the future go to f4 to put pressure on the isolated pawn on d5. So a multi-purpose move, knight g to e2. Fischer took on d4, and Euwe decided to take back with the pawn. Taking with the knight is also possible. Both players castled, and bishop e6 developing. Bishop c2 from Euwe with the idea of setting up a battery with queen d3, and then we have a checkmate threat in some variations with queen h7. Fischer plays his bishop back to e7. The bishop was no longer pinning the knight on c3 after white castled, and he reroutes it to e7, breaking the pin of his own knight. Knight f4, putting pressure on that d-pawn. And here queen d7 is the move according to the engine, and the game is in the balance. But Fischer, on his birthday, makes a mistake. He plays queen b6. And it's hard to foresee, but this move loses by force. And Euwe finds the refutation of queen b6. He first eliminates the knight on f6. Fischer recaptures, and then queen d3. With a checkmate threat on h7. You cannot play g6, because then there is knight takes e6, f takes, and now the pawn on g6 is hanging. White wins. So after queen d3, you have to do something else to deal with the checkmate threat, and Fischer played rook f2 d8. Rook ae1 from Euwe. And knight b4 with a fork, threatening to take off the bishop so that that battery will no longer be there. Euwe gave a check, king f8, and now look at this move, a2, a3, a beautiful move, with the idea to deflect the knight, this knight, from the protection of the d5 square. That's the point of a2, a3, and we see in a minute why that is important. Fischer's knight is attacked, he took on c2, but now knight c takes d5, taking with the other knight is also possible. An amazing move. It's attacking the queen, and this knight is also taking away the e7 square from the king. So now there's a checkmate in one threat with queen h8. And that's why Fischer has to take that knight off the board. Taking it with the bishop does not work, because then queen h8 is also checkmate, because now the rook takes the e7 square away. So the knight has to be taken, you cannot take with the bishop, so Fischer took with the rook. But there comes the other knight, knight takes d5 with the exact same problem. It's attacking the queen and threatening mate in 1 with queen h8, and there is no way out for black. If he defends against the mate, he simply loses his queen. And Bobby resigned here. Not a very nice birthday present from Max Euwe, the 5th official world champion in the history of our game. And we got a little taster of how strong he could play. Max Euwe is the godfather of Dutch chess, and he was rightly honored in his home city of Amsterdam with a square in his name, a statue on that square, and the Max Euwe Chess Center. Hope you learned something new about Max Euwe and that you enjoyed this game against Bobby Fischer, who would become world champion 15 years later. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel, and please leave a comment. I will read them all and I will reply to them all. If you liked the video, it would be great if you could share it on social media by clicking the share button on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter and on Facebook. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.